think people would be surprised, as I was, to kind of change that perspective to what really is a small body of evidence to kind of a moderate size to a large body of evidence in terms of study number.
Yeah, it really, it kind of depends on the type of evidence that meets your threshold. And what I mean by that is, every now and then there's these topics that come up that get really popular, and you find that there's like 4 actual studies on the topic with original data, and then like 9 reviews of those 4 studies. And it's just people talking about this very small body of evidence. But that doesn't mean that now there's, I think the numbers I used were 9 and 4. Doesn't mean that now there's 13 studies on it just because there's 13 papers, right? You start to find that people are really stretching the small amount of data into a bunch of commentary and interpretation. So, how much is enough? It depends usually on the standards of the field. In my opinion, it depends on the stakes of the question as well. So let's be honest, there's certain research questions in, especially the fitness realm, where the stakes are just incredibly low. They're just looking for these tiny effect sizes that would only be relevant if you were, elite world-class athlete looking for the just smallest advantage possible. And the evidence, the studies aren't done in that population. So in many cases, we don't even know with certainty if it's going to translate to them. We're kind of, the Olympics are going on right now. Sometimes we're looking for effect sizes that would only matter to a sprinter who's going to make the finals. And every single study on it is done in people who, can't run a mile in under 20 minutes, right? So it's like, I don't know if that's really strong evidence, even if we get, 25 of those for that particular application. So how much is enough depends on the stakes, depends on the quality of the studies, because at the end of the day, you can't take 11 really poorly designed studies and say, I bet that makes about 2 good ones. It doesn't work that way. Quality matters. It'd be like if you're not to act like it's some kind of inspired art to do research. It's very much a science, more so than an art. But it's like saying, listen, I suck at writing songs, but if I give you like 13 terrible songs, that's got to be as good as having like one hit, right? And it's like, no, when you write a hit, something special has come together. It's been done well, and it's been done right, and it meets the listener at the right moment in time, right? If you wrote something that was a hit in 1993 and you released it today, it would not become a hit today, most likely, because it was all off, right? So all of that is to say, like, you can't just go by volume. You have to also go by quality, because, like I said, 11 terrible studies does not equate to 2 good ones. So, yeah, it's tough to say in a generalizable sense, but ideally, assuming that the research is reasonably decent quality and that there's a typical range between fairly good studies and fairly poor studies, a lot of times I'd love to see ideally at least like a couple dozen studies on a topic before I feel like I have a really good sense of, before I really feel like I have my finger on the pulse of that topic.
Gotcha. And does consistency in terms of outcome play into that at all? Like, if you have 20 studies, all of them pretty much saying the same thing, versus 20 studies, 15 saying one thing and then 5 saying the other. Is that something you take into account?
Definitely. And that's why meta-analyses are such a useful tool. A lot of times people will say they're at the highest level of the hierarchy of evidence, the strongest level of evidence, the lowest potential for bias, all these different superlatives talking up their superiority. And they're a wonderful tool. I love meta-analyses. But yeah, one of the reasons that people heap all this praise on meta-analyses is because you can get this beautiful funnel plot. And to me, I think it's a crime that when exercise science and sport nutrition started getting into funnel plots, or started getting into doing a lot of meta-analyses, they really took off in the last like 10 years or so. no one appreciated funnel plots. People were not putting them in their papers, which to me is insane. I find it to be the most informative element of the typical meta-analysis. With a funnel plot, that's where you start to make sense of, okay, we got this one study that showed a huge positive effect. We got this other study that actually showed a sizable negative effect. We've got these other studies that show virtually no effect either way. The funnel plot literally plots them out in the shape of an upside down funnel. So it should be looking like a triangle. And you can make sense of, okay, so what is the typical effect in this body of literature? What seems to be that central point of this upside down funnel? Does there seem to be an acceptable level of symmetry in this funnel? If not, now you're starting to say, okay, we've got all these little studies with huge positive effect sizes, but there's no little studies with huge effect sizes on the other side of the mean outcome. And you start to say, okay, in that case, statistically speaking, the most likely scenario is that we are overestimating the effect size here. There should be symmetry in this funnel plot. And if there isn't, that gives us a good explanation of what could be going on. Now, every now and then, you may find a funnel plot where you see that there's not asymmetry, but there's just kind of these two clusters. There's like really good studies over here, really crappy studies over here in terms of the effect, really positive effect, really negative effect, and not a ton going on in the middle. And it starts to give you the impression, it's almost like we're estimating two different effect sizes within this funnel plot. And perhaps you go in to that meta-analysis and you say, let's look at the heterogeneity statistics. And you find out there's a lot of heterogeneity between studies, indicating some of these studies don't really seem to be honing in on the same thing, the same value, the same estimate. And so then you want to do some tests statistically to figure out why that might be. And so, for example, maybe you find that this intervention, whatever it is, works really well in trained people and doesn't do anything in untrained people. And you say, okay, now we're seeing why there was this study everyone talks about with a positive effect, but this other one that everyone talks about with a negative effect. You can say, okay, well, this was in trained, this was in untrained, or vice versa. Maybe there's a sex difference. Maybe these studies have different results based on the dose that was provided, if it's something that can be easily quantified. So a meta-analysis is such a powerful tool because you don't just it's not like some kind of black box, so to speak, where you jam all the studies in and it kicks out one number, which is the average effect. Sometimes people interpret them that way, but that is a sin of the highest order, in my opinion. A meta-analysis does so much more than that. It tells you about the heterogeneity, the variance in the type of estimates that we get, and it allows you to explore what is underlying this heterogeneity or variance in the type of estimates that we get. So when you find a body of literature where there are a few dozen studies published, that is where you say, okay, we really have an opportunity here with a meta-analysis to answer a lot of questions about how, when, where, and why this intervention does or does not work.